James Carafano. He's the Vice President of National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation. So, Jim, is Senator Scott right? Is it time for military action?
No. Look, one of two things are going to happen in very short order. Either Maduro is going to crush this rebellion, and it'll be quite bloody. And then what will happen is Guaido will flee the country. He'll have a government in exile. He'll have the world on his side, and there'll be a black eye against Maduro, and we'll be right where we are. Or Maduro will flee the country, go to an intergovernment. American military intervention makes no sense. You can't drop the 82nd Airborne in the middle of a civil war like this. And actually, this is Putin's dream. Like, yes, I'd love for the Americans to intervene and get bogged down in a quagmire in the middle of a country at the end of Latin America that is important to us, but this is not a vital.
But
US
Russia
interest.
Intervened, James. So, what should be the U.S. response if that's the case?
Well, look, this is a long way away from Moscow. This is not like the Russian intervention in Syria. They would have to have a very significant logistical footprint to be able to put military significant forces on the ground in Venezuela, and I just don't think Putin's up for that. Putin is a meddler and a schemer and a poke-in-your-eye guy. He is not the guy that's going to do something like, do an Alamo in the middle of Venezuela.
Hey, Jim, any sense of what's going to happen with the Venezuelan military? There was some question yesterday about whether more members of the military would side with Guaido. It seems like that has lost a little bit of momentum. What's your take?
Right. Yeah, I think this is in the military, we used to call this a meaning engagement, which is when two sides bump into each other and they didn't mean to. When Guaido organized these massive demonstrations, I believe Maduro was ready to leave the country and planning to do so, and then he was forced to stay. And then his response to that was to say, well, we'll go arrest Guaido and nip this in the bud. And then what Guaido did preemptively was call for the government to come down. So I don't think either side planned today to have this catastrophic struggle. And I don't think either side is confident that they know exactly what the what the Venezuelan military will do as this escalates.
Hey, Jim, John Layfield here. How do you handicap this? What do you think is going to happen? And what happens if Maduro wins? What happens to the country of Venezuela?
Right. Well, I think it's 50-50 because I think it's an unplanned crisis that neither side was ready for. And so how the military makes a decision, how they come down, I don't know how sitting here in Washington, D.C., we can calculate that. The worst case scenario is Maduro's forces bloodily crush this, and Guaido flees the country, and he has a government in exile, and the entire world condemns Venezuela, and we move on from there. The big loser here is Cuba. If Cuba is not careful, they have invoked the wrath of Khan. The Cubans could wind up with more tougher sanctions than they had the day after the Bay of Pigs. They could be worse off than they were at the start of the Obama administration. Trump will come down on them like a ton of bricks, and all they'll have to show for it is they have an ally in a destitute country at the far edge of Latin America.
Hey, Jim, it's Carol Roth. You're talking about these two sides, but we know that sometimes there is a third side to a story. What happens if Maduro does leave? Does Guaido have enough support, or is there potentially a third faction out there, some other type of uprising that we need to be concerned about if Maduro ends up leaving power?
I think we would quickly shift to the interim government, and I think there'd be so much global support for that all the messing around by the Russians and the Cubans and the Chinese wouldn't stop it. So I actually think we would rapidly restore. I think if you went back to Venezuela a year from today, if Maduro left today, that the level of prosperity that people had would be unprecedented. And coming from a country where virtually everybody is starving, my guess is that looking back at today, they would believe they're on a different planet.
Hey, Jim.